such a pleasure to be here in a room full of such powerful women who probably, actually it's true, this is a group of women who maybe don't need to know that much more about confidence, because from the stories I've heard from the award winners and by virtue of what all of you have done to be part of this group, I think you probably have more confidence than most of us, but it's still a thrill to be here and part of this effort to talk about the honest and real challenges that remain in terms of gender diversity. It's funny because just listening to Steve, and it was such a beautiful introduction, and then earlier I was talking to Michelle, who told me that she'd shown the video clips of the women Oscar nominees and how they squirm and they're not comfortable with it. And that's how I always feel when I'm introduced with this bio and people saying nice things about me, and I think I want to put my head down, and it's hard to listen to. What is that? What is that about? Part of it is, to some extent, confidence, Caddy and I have found, and for years now, I've been focused with my co-author, Caddy Kay, on issues of women in leadership, and we've really come to believe that confidence is an essential part of the equation, maybe almost a missing ingredient to some extent, and the confidence makes us better employees, better workers, better leaders, better entrepreneurs, but also, I think, better human beings. And really the most profound quote I heard about confidence that sticks with me from all of our research came from a Buddhist scholar, Sharon Salzberg, who said to us, we were trying to talk to a lot of different people about what they think confidence is and why it's important. And she said, I think confidence really is a kind of energy and an ability to move toward things in your life without holding back. And that really stuck with me, because I guess I just feel like I'm holding myself back a lot. Women often hold themselves back to some extent. I want to start our look at what's going on with women in confidence, if you will indulge me, with a biblical parable that I've made up. I've actually stolen a feminist joke that I've heard at a lot of different conferences, and I've transformed it. I don't know how many of you have heard it. It's sort of what if the three wise men had been three wise women? They would have arrived on time, and they would have brought useful gifts, and they would have, some diapers and stuff. So, and I can't remember how the full, but at some point, Caddy and I just took that and appropriated it and turned it into, what if there were a job posting for the three wise men? And the job descriptions where you have to have great navigational skills, you have to be good at astronomy, good with mothers and new babies, and a keen sense of Middle East protocol. So there are a couple people looking at this job. Balthazar is one of them, and he thinks to himself, well, navigational skills, there's GPS, how hard can that be? I got that down. Mothers and new babies, I've changed a diaper. Astronomy, really, how hard can it be to look at the stars? And then Middle East protocol, not so much, but I'll just bring a bottle of whiskey along to whatever's going on and everything will be fine. I'm applying for the job. Then there's Sarah, who thinks to herself, well, navigational skills. I guess I've lived in Cairo and Tokyo, and I know my way around those cities, and that was pretty, but I wouldn't say I'm good at that. Mothers and new babies, yes, I have children, I'm quite good at that. Astronomy, absolutely not, I don't know anything about it. Middle East protocol, well, I do have that master's degree in Arabic studies from Georgetown, but I wouldn't say that makes me an expert, so no, I'm not going to apply for that job. That's literally what we found when we started digging into the data is happening in the workplace in a very real way. I would say we to take a step back, we came upon this subject of confidence really as we were doing research and writing our first book, which was about women in the workplace, and really focused on all of this great data that you all should know, and you're living proof of it, but that it's whenever you have more women at the top of an enterprise or an organization, it makes more money, essentially. I'm boiling down dozens of studies now that show the same thing, but you slice it many different ways. Women on a board, women in senior management, whether you're measuring profits or however you measure, the diversity at the top and women at the top makes a difference. And we were intrigued by that and diving into that, interviewing lots of women who were very much like you, who to us appeared incredibly confident on the face of it, but then would say things to us like, I'm about to get a big promotion, but I'm not sure that I'm ready. My bosses want me to take on a new assignment. I don't know if I'm the right person. I'm not sure I'm there yet. Sometimes I feel like an imposter. And this was shocking to us, mainly because we knew we felt that way sometimes, individually, but to see women who to us looked so successful kind of talking about these things seemed really discordant. But we filed it away because we didn't really know what to make of it, and then we started examining it later, and what we really wanted to find out was there data to support this? Was this just anecdotal? And we really found an enormous amount of data that shows in general that women are, to some extent, in the workplace, less confident than men. What do I mean by that? Some of the data is very much like that biblical story. So Hewlett-Packard and subsequently other corporations have done studies that show that women will apply for a new job or a promotion when we feel we have what percentage of the job qualifications, would you guess? Yes. And there was no option for 110% or 150%, or that would probably, we would wait for that moment. Men will do it, take that plunge at about 60%. And that makes a big difference because, again, this isn't just about jobs or promotions, it's about how are we measuring ourselves and our capabilities? And this can play out every day in the workplace in terms of whether we think we're ready with an assignment or we're ready to say something in a meeting, and on and on and on. The academic data we found was even more voluminous, if you will. We had one professor tell us that whenever she wants to give her new crop of graduate students a study to do where she knows absolutely what the results will be in advance, so this is just practice for them, she tells them, go out, give men and women a quantitative reasoning test of some sort, ask the women how they think they've done. They always think they've underperformed. I mean, they just underestimate how they've done. Ask the men always overestimate how they've done. In fact, the whole overestimation has been studied by Columbia Business School, they found there that on average men overestimate by about 30% how well they've done or how capable they are. They call it honest overconfidence. So for all you men in the room, it's not a bad thing, it's an honest overconfidence. And it's funny because really we did a little bit of looking into the overconfidence, and I'll say it made me feel, it made me understand to some extent my husband and a lot of the men in my life so much more, because there were many times where I'd think, is that just bravado? How can they really think that? Or are they just faking it? Well, they're not actually. Generally speaking, they're not faking it. It's just a real belief that they're slightly more capable than maybe they are. And we go the other way. And that's just, I'm generalizing, but that's a bit of what the data shows. So what we found, and there's an enormous amount of other data that some of you have probably seen in Mika Brzezinski's books, and about what women will ask for financially at the start of a career and what we're comfortable with, but the data just really adds up to paint a picture of not that women aren't successful in sitting around never raising our hands, never saying anything, in that kind of cliched version of underconfidence, but what it illustrates is that generally speaking, when we turn our lens on ourselves and we measure ourselves as to whether we're ready for something, we're wrong. We're judging ourselves too harshly, and it often has an implication that we're not taking a risk or taking action. We even wanted to look at how important confidence really is to success. I mean, is this worth writing a whole book about? And there was one researcher we found out in California who's studying confidence versus competence. And when I read my co-author's notes on this, I really thought she had mistranscribed it, because Cameron Anderson has found that in most cases in terms of success, confidence trumps competence, which I just found hard to believe, because women, generally speaking, are all about competence, right? I mean, we focus on dotting every I, crossing every T, just making sure everything is done well. And we found this really hard to believe, that he's studying it with his graduate students. He picks out graduate students by giving them the beginning of a 2-year period, giving everybody a history exam of sorts with a lot of ringers in it. So you're supposed to take off the historical events you recognize, and he'll put things like Queen Shattuck or Murphy's Last Ride in there. And so a lot of people are familiar with these non-existent historical events. They confidently check the boxes. And he follows these more confident students for a number of years as they're working with other students, doing group collaborations, presentations, and at the end of the period, through multiple surveys, finds that those students are the ones who are more often viewed as leaders, whose ideas rise to the top, who are listened to and respected. We were dismayed at this notion, but the silver lining, I will say, is that he did point out that the gap between confidence and competence can't be too big, because of course in certain professions that would really be helicopter pilots, something like that would be a real problem, or even financial industry, a bit of a problem too for all of us. So that the gap can't be too big, and also that the overconfidence he was measuring was, again, that honest overconfidence, because the other interesting thing he's studying is the fact that we can all, even though we're not aware of it consciously, we can all spot or recognize somebody who's faking it through subtle signals and eyes, the face, the way his facial expression is presenting itself. It's really interesting stuff, and so it has to be a genuine belief. It's not somebody who's just faking it, if you will. I would say that in terms of, again, the value of confidence, the best argument we got was from somebody who's studying confidence in rats. And believe it or not, some rats are confident, some rats are anxious. We didn't know this setting out, but this guy's brilliant at Cold Spring Harbor Labs in New York. And he said, look, essentially what our confidence should be for us in the best case is a kind of barometer that we use to help us make the best decisions possible in our lives. And ideally, our confidence should be as in line with our abilities and capabilities as possible, so we're making the right decisions. And what we started to visualize as we were writing this book is that for women, it's just our confidence barometer is off, generally speaking. We then decided, because we're TV journalists and we like to see things, and we're sometimes like things that seem a little cliched, we thought, let's go look for amazing examples of female confidence in action. Where can we see it? Where can we be sure we'll know it, what it looks like, and unsullied and unrestrained? So the first thing we did was hang out with a bunch of WNBA players, which was really awesome, in Washington. So it was the Mystics and a couple of their all-star players who look incredibly confident and were certainly talented. And the interesting thing was, once we sat down with them after some of the games or practices just to talk, they sounded, it could have been Caddy and I having a conversation. Crystal would say, well, I feel like I let my fans down today. I don't know what was going on. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not sure my teammates. I think so-and-so's frustrated with me or upset with me. And Monique actually said to us, I know a lot of the guy players were friends, and it's true that right down to the last male player who will sit on the bench the whole time, his confidence is right up there, like I'm just that good. And for women, it's not that way. And even more interesting, their coach, who has coached NBA and WNBA, said, look, women as a team bring a lot of unique positives to team building. But one thing that he's noticed with his female players is they have a harder time shaking things off and letting things roll off of them, and that affects their confidence in their game. Then we thought, all right, well, that wasn't as clear-cut as we thought. Let's look at the military. Surely, especially young women who are, going to West Point or whatever, they must feel incredible confidence at this point. And we found a graduate from Annapolis who had just been accepted into this extraordinarily challenging program, the Explosive Ordnance Division, right? She graduated with flying colors. Just, only a handful of people were accepted to move on to this next incredibly dangerous step. And we were making conversation at the beginning of the interview. Said, Mikey, her name's Mikey Bellata, congratulations, that's really quite an accomplishment. And she kept saying, I was just lucky. I'm not sure how it happened. And you think, well, no, I mean, we're allowed to say that, but you're in the military. Like, there's no luck with what you accomplish. Surely there are benchmarks and things you have to pass. People, they're not just doing this, rolling the dice and picking you, but she had such a hard time owning that accomplishment. We also then talked to Christine Lagarde, who is the first female head of the IMF, who really is just extraordinary. And we always envisioned her as almost the superhero, you know, where, as you heard, wearing the big W on her chest of confidence for us. And she is, to some extent. I mean, she's, you know, really tall, which I love, so powerful, charming, also incredibly and frustratingly stylish, like French, wore this scarf. I mean, Caddy and I walked away from our dinner. The first thing we said was, how did she get her scarf to do that? And like, what is that about? And then we talked about the other thing she said, which was really interesting, which she said, you know, I guess that in some ways I still lack confidence because I over-prepare for everything. I never want to be caught off guard. If there's anything coming up, I prepare, I think she said, I prepare upside down, inside out, backwards, forwards, and it's exhausting. And then she paused and she said, and Angela Merkel and I have compared notes on this, the fact that we both over-prepare. It's like, really? The two, like, these most powerful women in the world, two of them are sitting there comparing notes on over-preparation. And what, I mean, so what all of that did for us in our brief visual survey, or in-person survey of confidence, I guess, was we started to realize that, again, a lack of confidence can be a lot of things that we wouldn't have thought. For example, and I'll get into this in a little bit, but this sort of perfectionism, over-preparation aspect of being a woman that many of us have really can be equated with, to some extent, a lack of confidence, and certainly a lack of willingness to take risk. The next thing we did, and this brings me right into, I think, what's so important about confidence for all of us, say, all right, what is confidence? Because we decided we just wanted to dissect it completely. And it took a long time to get academics and scientists and everybody we talked to agree on a central definition of confidence, because we had thought it was more something like self-esteem, that maybe you feel good about yourself, valuable in your life. But finally, once we pieced it together, the best definition we got came from a professor at Ohio State, Dr. Richard Petty, who said confidence is the stuff that turns our thoughts into action. And it was a really simple but elegant and compelling formula, and especially so, again, because I think this action component of confidence is critical for women. It drives action. And what we came to realize later is that it's a virtuous circle, that the way we build more confidence is through the process of taking action. So it involves risk-taking to take the action, maybe some failure and struggle, and ultimately mastery. And that process, which requires acting and taking risk, is what will ultimately build confidence as well. We got an incredible definition of inaction versus action, and what that means from a researcher who was literally looking at gender and confidence. And he was Zach Estes. He essentially gave men and women a spatial ability test. And that's a kind of a Rubik's Cube 3D test that, by the way, often in IQ tests, women don't do as well on spatial ability, men don't do as well on verbal ability, and that's often where there's a difference. So that's what he found in the first round. The men were scoring better. Then he broke down the test and started looking at the results, and he realized something interesting. The women were skipping a lot of the questions. Then he told the next group and the subsequent groups, everybody has to answer all the questions. The scores were almost the same. So what he realized as he started putting together all of his research is that when the women weren't sure, they weren't going to take a risk of answering. They were just going to move on and skip the question. And of course, that had results, as it does in our lives when we choose inaction over action. The science of confidence, for me, was personally the most compelling part. At one point, I remember our book editor saying, you cannot write a scientific tome on confidence. Nobody's going to buy it. I say, but the neuroscience is so interesting. There's so much going on with genetics. And so we finally winnowed it down to 1.5 chapters, I think, it is fascinating because the field of genetics and personality and where all the stuff we do every day comes from is exploding, and it's so exciting. But to be honest, we didn't really think we were going to find that confidence is genetic. I mean, we thought we needed to say, okay, what's the deal? Do men have a confidence gene that we don't have? But we really didn't think we were going to uncover a genetic link to confidence. But in fact, once we started talking to the people who study confidence in monkeys and the guys studying it in rats and geneticists and all range of people studying this, we found there is general consensus that confidence is between 25 and 50% hereditary, which we thought was really interesting. There is not one confidence gene. There are right now, and believe me, this will change in another 1.5 years, there'll be more things that they know about, but right now there are a handful of genes that affect things in our brain like oxytocin and dopamine and serotonin. Those are all things that you may have heard about because they're often linked to anxiety or, and how we deal with those medically, but the flip side of that could be confidence, and we're supportive of confidence. So if you're born with some of those variants, you have more natural confidence to start your life with. It was right at this time I had the brilliant idea, again, I think drawing on my TV background, of like, this will be a great hook for the book. Let's get our genes tested and find out whether we're naturally confident or not. And Caddy was really busy, and so I sort of convinced her she wasn't paying any attention, and we spit into this little tube and sent it off. And then we were both incredibly nervous because we thought, well, do we really want to know all this information that's going to come back? And we got the email, and we couldn't actually understand the email, so we had to get on the phone with the neuroscientists who basically informed us that we're both basket cases in terms of genetic confidence. And I will really, and this is no exaggeration, you can ask both of our husbands, what ensued was a week of hand-wringing and like, again, I really think it's because we're women, like we failed some sort of test, we should have had perfect genes and we don't, and what does this mean? And finally, we were able to just get past it with actually the help of the other science we were uncovering at that time, which is really focused on brain plasticity. So it's so exciting what they know now about how much we can rewire our brains, even at my advanced age. And all of us can just, with changes in the way we think, small changes in our behavior, they can literally see now that helps to rewire our brain. They study it with meditation, people with PTSD, people using cognitive behavioral therapy to fight a fear of spiders, and they can do before and after and see changes in the brain. And so when we say now you can rewire your brain to be more confident, we literally mean it. It's not a sort of cliche ripped out of some magazine. They can see it happening. And that's what I think we realized, well, all right, we're not perfect examples of confidence, either of us, but we're certainly no longer basket cases, and we've built confidence over the years, even though we didn't necessarily set out to do it. I think that the other thing that was interesting for us, though, about the science was, at that point we were left with, well, is there a gender difference in terms of the science or not? We hadn't found anything obvious, but then we started to look at the biology of our brain, or the physiology really, how our brains work. And that is where we found some interesting differences that affect essentially what we came to see as our risk-taking posture. So women spend a lot more time using our prefrontal cortex than men do. And that's the home of rational thought, reason, analysis, right? We just have a lot more matter in there that we're relying on all the time. We also, and again, so think about that, right? Women are, when I said at the beginning that our first book had been about more women at the top means more money, and some of the reason for that, I just want to take a step back and say, because we were, what is that? What is it that women are doing differently? So women do tend, in general, to have a distinct management style. We tend to be more collaborative, we're more cautious, we look out at the future scenarios more, we're often good at negotiating, finding compromise, right? So, and that's when all that prefrontal cortex stuff started to make sense to us, right? It's sort of more of an analytical approach, looking out, looking around corners. There's also a part of our brain that's dubbed by scientists the worrywart center, and it's something that scans the horizon for problems, looking for things that seem off, not quite right, things that don't match. It's physically bigger in the female brain than in the male brain. And again, that contributes to a posture that might not lead one to want to just go take big risks, right? Because we're going to see things as slightly riskier than men do in many cases. Testosterone plays a huge difference in our brains. Men have 10 times more of it than we do. And there's study after study now that shows testosterone is a huge boost for risk taking. In some cases there's one incredible study done with, I think, London stock traders that showed that on the days when their testosterone levels were highest on the days when the riskiest trades were made. It's really interesting stuff. We don't have as much. Estrogen, on the other hand, drives more consensus building, compromise, higher EQ skills. But again, I'm not suggesting we should be slapping testosterone patches on and trying to change things, because all of the things that we have in our brains naturally are also what are supporting this incredibly valuable management style and skill set that we bring to the table. I think that what Caddy and I realized in the end is that it's when we turn our lens on ourselves and we're judging our own qualifications in many cases that we are, that it doesn't work as well. When we're employing those skills on behalf of our business or our employers, it's actually can be quite valuable. But it's interesting and helpful, I think, to know that in general, women may have a natural view of risk that is very different from the view that men have. And the other thing that I think was interesting for us is there's science now that shows women seem to have more neurons firing at any given time than men do, that our brains are just more active. And you kind of think, oh, well, that's a good thing, right? Isn't that better? But what some psychologists think is now that's the physical evidence of something they've known for a long time, that women tend to ruminate and think and overthink more than men do. I don't know how many in the room overthink. I think I literally thought I was one of the few people who had this rumination thing until we wrote this book, and then I realized, oh, I guess a lot of women actually do this. My most embarrassing recent story about overthinking, and we do it whether we get a bad review, a phone call from a friend, but I had this situation where right when the book was about to come out, I was still doing a lot of work for World News Tonight, and Diane Sawyer was still anchoring, and I thought, well, I haven't been following up on this project. I better send her an email to let her know I'm really working on it. So I send this email off, and I don't hear back for an hour, 2 hours. By the third hour, I'm thinking, maybe Diane Sawyer's really mad at me because I'm writing this book and I haven't been doing my work for ABC. And then by the next morning, I'm thinking maybe everybody at ABC News is meeting right now to talk about me and this other project. And by the end of the day, I'm thinking I gotta call my agent and find out what's going on. And it was just 2 days of kind of obsessive thinking. And again, I think all of us do that more or less than others, and the triggers can be different, but it's, as you can see, that can be an impediment to taking risks and taking action, too much thinking. One of the other things that we found that was so fascinating is, well, there are two things I should say that also affect confidence. One, we all know and we feel it, and especially all of you in the room as entrepreneurs and business builders and doing all the incredible things you do, is the fact is when the playing field isn't level, that affects our confidence, right? So that's just a reality right now, and it's important to be aware of it because the data on stereotype threat and what it means when you feel you're in a minority of any sort, or there aren't a lot of other people around you, it affects your confidence and it affects your work, it affects your performance. And so that is real, and it's not something that's easy to fix, although it's slowly happening, but I think we can't ignore that. But the other part of this puzzle that was so interesting to us is, and I talked a little bit about perfectionism earlier, is we were really curious about girls. And I know there's some young women in the room today, and I'm so glad you're here. It's just, girls today are so successful at school, right? They are just outperforming boys. They're the superstars, they're going to college, you know, flying colors, and we can think, what's happening? Because our data show that even younger women in their 20s, right, are still feeling, after a few years in the workplace, this lack of confidence or a drop in confidence. Carol Dweck, who wrote a great book called Mindset, actually said to us, look, if life were one long grade school, women would rule the world. But the fact is, the rules change, and they change significantly. So think of it like this. You know, from a very young age, little girls are better able, because of our EQ skills and the way our brains are developing, to kind of color within the lines, be quiet, be good, please people, do what adults expect, get along with people. And so pretty quickly, the teachers and adults in their lives reward us for that, right? Because honestly, I'm a parent who doesn't want that kind of behavior. I far prefer that to the alternative. And before you know it, girls start to internalize that as why we're valuable, right? Because I'm nice to people, I please people, I get everything right on my test, and I'm gonna keep doing that. And then I'm in middle school and I'm in high school, and suddenly we're full-blown perfectionists. And what do perfectionists not want to do? Take risks and fail, because that's too frightening. Boys from the earliest stages are failing and screwing up all over the place. And guess what? That's a good thing, because they quickly learn it doesn't matter that much, right? You make a mistake, you get over it, you make someone mad, and you move on, and that's life, right? That's how life works. So we have these incredibly qualified girls and young women getting out of college, like really, to some extent, having learned a lot of the wrong lessons for success in the real world, especially, namely, that we have to be comfortable failing and risking. And so, looking at what we can do if we're feeling, and again, I think I'm speaking to a group of women that already maybe has a reservoir of natural confidence, but again, remembering that a lack of confidence doesn't necessarily mean somebody who's shy and quiet and hasn't started a business and doesn't want to raise her hand in a meeting. It may be somebody who's perfectionistic and doesn't want to take a risk and just takes, you know, an extra 5 months to do something she could have done a month ago. Or you know, there's a different kind of profile of what a lack of confidence can look like. What can we do, right, as grown-ups about a lack of confidence to build it? Well, luckily, it's actually pretty straightforward. Not saying it's easy, but it's a straightforward recipe. We dubbed it into act more, think less, and I say for men it's the opposite, right? It's the opposite formula for success. For women, it's act more, right? Take more risks, think less, stop the rumination, and then be authentic. And I'm gonna wrap up with the authentic piece, but I'll just a couple of takeaways about this act more. We have got to find ways to get outside of our comfort zone regularly. The more as women we can get comfortable with failure and understand that failure is part of success, the better off we are. In the book, we talk about something called fail fast, which is the techie buzz phrase, which really has to do with, you know, the world's moving too fast for perfectionism these days. You got to try a bunch of things, know some are going to fail, learn from the failure, and move on. So for all of us, of course, stepping outside of our comfort zone will mean something different. For some people, it will mean speaking up more at a meeting. For some people, there was one attorney, a partner, an incredibly successful partner at a law firm we interviewed, who said her problem was decision making, right? She was at a level where she had to make an enormous number of decisions every day, but she didn't ever want to make a decision that would be wrong. So she was just holding everything up. And she finally had to create a rule for herself, which was 10% of my decisions every day will be wrong. And that's okay, because I'll just deal with the fallout, but I gotta get through the rest of this stuff. For some of us, it's gonna be about doing things that aren't perfect. I mean, I finally had to do that in my work, because especially working for Good Morning America, I could end up keeping an entire team of people up all night working. And I often did, right, to get a 2-minute piece just exactly right. And I realized, A, I was getting too tired. B, I didn't have enough energy to do the volume of stuff I could be doing. C, I was kind of pissing people off. And finally that it was, I had to create a rule. It was 80% of what I'm doing can be just good enough. And I had to really force myself to think, like, I label it, this is a good enough thing, I am putting this much time into it, and it's fine. And it felt really risky to me for a long time to have something on the air that I just felt wasn't perfect, but I got a lot more done. And so again, for all of us, identifying what that is important, but it's critical to try to start pushing yourself. On the think less, I will give one tip, and there's more in the books, but I found it incredibly helpful. If you get into that ruminating cycle about a review or an email that wasn't returned, whatever it is, there's incredible research that shows, and this is almost basic cognitive behavioral therapy, if you can come up with any other excuse in your brain, almost become a public defender for yourself in your own brain, like any other excuse for why what's happening is happening. Well, my Diane Sawyer example, I think she's just back from a trip to Africa, or I don't think she ever returns emails until the weekend, or the broadcast is about to be on, of course I'm not going to. Anything like that will actually just stop that process in its tracks. It's surprising, and let you move on. So it's important to be aware of it, and then try to just use that technique. And what I love about the research is it shows it doesn't even have to be a particularly good or reasonable excuse. Any excuse will do. Something else that's really helpful, I think, for women in terms of tapping into our kind of authentic power is something we call in the book moving from me to we, which is that women often do feel a kind of natural confidence when we are working on behalf of other people. And so and they've done incredible studies on this with young women, for example, just going out into the workforce. When they spend their time thinking about, oh my gosh, I have to do this job, I'm not qualified, they're gonna find out I'm a fraud, I don't know what I'm doing, and that's their focus, it's disastrous. When they can literally turn their brains to, I'm supposed to help Bob and Ann on this today, what can I do to help them get this done? And start focusing that way, they feel an enormous amount of confidence, and then of course, they start to actually learn what they're doing, and they feel even more confidence. But it works for speaking. I'm a natural introvert, so public speaking is not, it's not easy for me. And if I felt that I were coming out here talking all about me, I would feel really uncomfortable. But if I feel that I'm talking about things that are going to help people, research that people are going to find interesting, they're going to be things they're going to take away, I find it much easier. So that's almost a mental trick that I think can be really useful. And I just want to wrap up and then take questions with this idea of authenticity, because we found it to be really important. Christine Lagarde said to us at one point, she gave an example of being on a panel with all women and one man at Davos. And she was about to make a point. She said, the man kept interrupting, and I thought the point she was going to make was that we all need to learn to interrupt more, because that's the only way we're going to get things. Because I think there was that journalist in me too. That's what I've been told my whole career. You got to be tough, and you got to ask mean questions, and you have to interrupt. And so I thought, well, okay, yeah, I know that. And she said, no, that's actually, I was going to say the opposite. That in this particular context, he looked out of place, and the conversation was going really well otherwise. And I think it's really important that women, as we're pursuing leadership and confidence, whatever it is we're pursuing, that we don't lose what makes us unique and authentic and powerful. Again, going back to all that data also about what it is that helps the bottom line here, that we do have unique skills and qualifications. And that got us to the realization that a lot of what we think about as confidence is kind of this madman style behavior of like speaking loudly and being first and being the most aggressive and owning everything, that's just a kind of behavior. It's not necessarily confident behavior. Not for everybody anyway. There are different ways to be confident, different ways to express confidence. We talked to some really interesting people at the White House, for example, about the value of quiet confidence and confident analysis at the end of a meeting instead of at the beginning. So I want to take questions. I just want to leave you with this idea of, as you go out, because all of you are so influential to the people working for you and with you, and you're as role models for women. Think about the power you have when you can be a disruptor on this issue and bring it up. Don't be afraid to take risks. Don't be afraid to talk about this in an open, transparent way, because know that as you're doing it, you're not only going to build your own confidence, but you're also going to be, as role models, increasing the confidence of a lot of women around you. Thank you very much, and I would love to hear what you're interested in hearing about. We have mics around the room, so I see a lady in red there, but let's go to the first lady in red here. Oh wait, and we have dueling. Yes, we'll start here.
As women would, you go.
Yes.
No, you go. First of all, just an amazing presentation.
Thank you.
Probably a lot of us sitting in the room thinking, that was really good for me to hear today.
Thank you.
I would love your feedback on when a woman asserts herself or is appearing confident, both other men and women can interpret it as arrogant. It might not be taken in the manner that's meant. Can you talk a little bit about the research and what that found?
It is, well, it's true. And we talked about this morning, that it just, that women are still expected, and it's a reality, right? We're all working for change together, so it's a process. And women are still expected to behave within far narrower guidelines than men are. Our behavior just can't go as far out of the box before it causes issues. By the way, both ways, right? So a woman who's quieter in a meeting might not have the leadership skills versus a man who's a quiet leader actually seems more confident. And also, it's as you said, women who seem confident can seem aggressive, or the B word. The research is there, and it's true. I will say it is changing to some extent, and what I have seen is that there's far more willingness to have open, transparent conversations about leadership style, behavior style, management style, and that I think one of the best ways to combat it, if you are either this way or that way, or you're feeling your style is going to ruffle feathers, is to be really transparent about it with the people either you're managing or for whom you're working. If you talk about, this is how I run things, I'm blunt, I'm this, and I actually think it's an asset, and this is how I do it. And I've especially found with men lately, when I have, there are men in the room today, thank you, and then sometimes there are audiences with a lot of men or male managers, they're really interested in talking about this. They want to get it right? They want to figure this out too, and I think sometimes it's like a light bulb goes off, oh, I didn't understand that, I didn't know that, and I think trying to be transparent about it, and conversely, if you think your strength is to listen and not talk, make that a virtue. Own that, right? Say, I'm doing this on purpose because this is how I think I work best. But I don't, the other thing, and I say this especially to young women who are so eager to get everything right, and how do I do this, how do I navigate without, and we are gonna bump into things and have trouble and make some people mad and have issues, and I think we have to be ready for a little bit of that too, because we're still trying to change the workplace. Yes.
Hi. My name is Victoria Rock. I own Victoria Legal and Corporate Services. We are historians of the spoken word. We do court reporting, transcription, videography, and worldwide video conferencing. My question to you is, wow, when you prepared or got ready to interview, for instance, the Clintons or anyone that, is there any kind of exercise that you do to build your confidence to be able to sit across from them and actually interview them naturally and authentically without trying to second guess, am I doing the right thing?
You know, I wish I could say yes. I feel like I wish earlier on I had done all this research and I could have used it in my career when I was a young woman. But because I'm a master procrastinator, I do things at the last minute, like I work best when I cram, and so usually I would just be everything coming together at the last minute, and a lot of stress would really focus me, and so but it's not a great method that I would recommend. And I also think for a long time, I was probably less confident in interviews like that because I really felt a lot of pressure in my industry to be somebody I really wasn't naturally, right? There's a lot of pressure, especially, less when I was in Russia, but especially when I was covering the White House. It's a really macho beat, and a lot of pressure to just be like, you know, gotcha journalism, you have to put it this way, you have to do this, you have to do that, and it took me a while to realize that, you know, when I do it my way, people respond to me, and people talk and they say things they probably don't even mean to say, and that's even more valuable than just coming at it all like a freight train, because that's not. Yes. Okay. Oh, is there one here?
Hi, I'm Suze O'Donnell. I'm the founder and president of Thrivatize LLC. And my question relates a little bit to the work-life balance piece. So I work with women who are planning to have families or already have children. And I find that they're very confident in their skill set and their experience to get promoted, but they're afraid to go after the promotion because they think it'll require more after-hours work and things like that. So confident in skill set, ready to get promoted, but just opt out because they're not confident they'll get that balance. Do you have any anecdotal comments based on some of the women you spoke with, if that played a factor in some of their confidence at work?
I mean, it does. There's an enormous amount of data on that the women sort of wanting to plateau because they just don't want more responsibility and more hours and what they view as more stress as they're trying to balance everything. So I think, you know, that's a reality as well that we can't really ignore. That I think that in many cases we haven't figured out the perfect equation so that women can, you know, be on a career path that's moving this way and quickly, but then be able to step off and step back on and, you know, be at home and be here. You know, a lot of places are trying and it's worked. I mean, for me it was really bumpy and involved a lot of like tears in front of bosses and awkward conversations and just like humiliating things that, you know, and there's still, I think, probably not really a great policy at ABC, right? Everybody just kind of has to fend for themselves, but in a lot of places that it works a little bit better. But I think that somebody said something interesting to me. She was an investment banker at one point, and she said, and I think this is true, and so we have to keep this in mind too. So the family piece is true, and women, we do often value time with our families, time with our friends, what we think of as maybe a job that has meaning. We place more value on that stuff often than men do, right? We have a broader way that we measure what's valuable to us. It's not just a title or money. But I also think, so this woman said to me, you have to keep in mind that after 2 or 3 years, the data shows women will enter the workforce and then start to feel they don't feel as clearly as the men do. On day one they did, but 3 or 4 years later, they don't feel as clearly that they will achieve the same level. And that is probably, it's probably just all very subtle, but it's not really about the kids or the family at that point. It's really about what they see around them and the stereotype threat. And so to some extent, by the time a woman reaches a point, again, maybe not at your company, but in a sort of big, everyday company, reaches a point where she is having kids and she's making a decision about how to best spend her time, she may be making a rational decision because she's also seeing that what are the odds and am I really going to, she's not seeing or feeling it as clearly as the men around her. I could have that. And I think if she could keep that feeling with her for a longer part of her career, then she'd probably be prepared to take the risk and say, I'm going to give this a try. I bet I can make the schedule work. Sorry, that was a long and complicated answer. Yes.
Hi, Mrs. Shipman. Really great presentation.
Thank you.
And both of us, we have some similarities and some in common. And I was relate some similarities when you were at the male-dominated force. So my question to you is, I was in a lot of male-dominated workplaces. How do you overcome the woman's power? Whereas you are at the table, there are so many males, and they are the decision makers. Just like in the Oscar events, there are so many decision makers that are male-dominated. How do you really overcome your confidence? Hey, I need to speak up. This is my decision. So, as a young entrepreneur, do you have any recommendations, advice to recommend? How do we really really superpower our women's confidence?
There are moments when it can be really intimidating. It's funny, Caddy always tells this story. I'll just tell her story. She won't care, she's not here. But she tells this story about being and she's this established journalist for the BBC, but being a couple of years ago called in to a group at the White House with experts on the White House about some big Middle East thing that was unfolding, right? And it was all men who she felt were covering the Middle East, experts, knew all this stuff. And so, of course, she's feeling like, I'm just a generalist, I don't know this stuff, I don't know. And she's thinking, I know I should ask a question, but I don't want to, but I should. But I think she said she ultimately realized, I have to just jump out and ask this question because this is crazy. I need to force myself to do it. And once she did, she realized what was all that about. And I think that was for her a confidence breakthrough. And I think sometimes we have to recognize as women that we don't have the confidence on hand, but we have to just understand we're afraid or we're nervous, but we need to act in spite of it. So sometimes men will say to me, I get intimidated too. We lack confidence. Why is it all this focus on women? Men, we don't have perfect confidence. But the one thing we found is that often when men lack confidence, they will use that as a spur to act anyway, right? That's a sort of, I'm gonna go ahead and act. And women will often use it as a reason to retreat. And I think if we can just become a little more aware, like you're doing, at least you're sitting around and you're analyzing and you have a goal and you say, I'm not leaving this meeting until I have made this point. And you have to just become very deliberate about it. And then over time, it becomes a habit. And you really do start to rewire your brain that way. But at the beginning, you just have to act in spite of your fear. Yes?
My name is Michelle Kelly, and I can't wait to type up my notes and send them to my daughter at college. Thank you for your beautiful presentation today. This is going to reverberate to other generations, I'm sure other mothers who will share it with their daughters. My question to you is there an iconic historical figure who is a confident woman, in your opinion? And is there a contemporary woman of today who is a role model of confidence for you?
Well, my daughter was just talking to me about Eleanor of Aquitaine. So she was making a case to me that she was this historical, confident figure, and I didn't know much about her, but listening to Della describe her, I thought she seemed incredible. We write in the beginning of our book about, mean, and this isn't, she's not an historical figure, she's a current figure, but one person we mull about in the beginning of our book is Malala, just in terms of that, like, what is it in a brain like that that makes you think you can accomplish what she accomplished, right? It's just this incredible, I mean, part of it must be bravery, right? It's sheer bravery, it's not just confidence, but part of it really is about, yeah, I can do that, why can't I do that? And that was, to me, that sort of the clarity of what she did is really inspiring. And I would say that what for me on an everyday basis, I find I'm collecting stories now from women who take risks and just do things. I like to listen to women who just do things that sound incredibly surprising and think, how did you get the idea to do that? I'm so inspired by that. So I think they're everywhere. I mean, you heard the awardees today. It's incredible what they've accomplished. So I really, I mean, there's so many role models today, right? I look at the U.S. women's soccer team that I think is so compelling and what they've done and overcome. And again, I do feel like Christine Lagarde, there's a special place in my heart for her because she really does go around to all of these incredibly powerful high-level meetings and give people grief for the fact that there aren't more women on their boards or they're this or they're that. I mean, she's just like on it constantly. And so I could go on and on, but that's a few anyway. And you know what I'll say is also, and you might feel this about your daughter, my daughter is a confidence role model for me in some ways. I mean, I really feel like I'm learning from her and I just am in awe of our younger generation. Yes.
Hi.
Hi.
My name is Kimberly Thomas. First of all, I just want to give you a standing ovation.
Thank you. Thank you very much. See, and I'm going to own that instead of looking down and being shy. Thank you.
Yes. I thank you for what you said, what you told us today. You touched me and you taught me, and I thank you for that. My question is regarding rewiring your brain. I heard you say that a couple different times. I'm very much interested in knowing how is it that I can rewire my brain, and also as a financial planner, I speak with families all the time. Most of my clients are women, and I want to be a person to help them to accomplish their financial goals and objectives. And sometimes it's a big job for me. It's a big job for us, everyone who's in the financial industry, to do what it is that we do. And we have to give them words of encouragement. And sometimes people, they just don't receive it well. So what is it that I can say to help rewire their brains to say, it's okay, take the risk. If you put $25 a month away, you won't be able to retire. You need to put more. It's okay. So what can I do?
Well, so what, and there's more information on this in the book, but a lot of literally the science of rewiring your brain it's basic cognitive behavioral therapy. And what that means is changing the habits of the way your brain thinks. So for example, another example, we talked to a woman who's a neuroscientist, this brilliant neuroscientist, but who said her mental default habit, as she started to become aware of the way her brain worked, was to ride home on the bus every day and make a list of everything she had done wrong that day. Right? Not on purpose. She didn't say, I'm going to beat up on myself and write out a list. But that was just where her brain went, right? Just, oh, I wish I had done that, I didn't do that, like I didn't. And then because she's a neuroscientist and was really focused on brain plasticity, she realized she was actually rewiring her brain in a really negative way by doing that, having those repetitive thoughts day after day. So then she forced herself to create a new habit, which was every day, I'm gonna think of the 2 things, and she said it's a much shorter list, but the 2 things that went really well. And that is what I'm going to spend my time thinking about. So that's one example. So if you're trying to rewire somebody's brain to get them more focused on risk, and that risk can be acceptable, for example, then what you need to really do is help come up with some exercises that things they're gonna do every day, a thought they're gonna have, a list they're going to make, things where they've actually been organized and it's turned out well, or things where they've actually taken a risk, and in fact, and I mean, the research shows if you start to, if you can look back at a list of your accomplishments right before you're going to give a big speech, you feel a lot more confident. If you start focusing on positive things in your head and spending more energy on those sorts of things than the negative, that's going to start to get your brain in that habit. So it really is about creating a framework of exercises that don't take a lot of time, but they're really important. Because the way we use our brain matters, because it really does start to get set. But there's more specific stuff and other resources in the book in terms of doing that. But it is very possible. I'm getting a. Okay, good. I wasn't trying to sell it, but it's just in the interest of time. I'm getting the hook. So thank you, thank you very much.